Oh boy, that's not good.
Critical hit. Weapon destroyed.
And I'm out of ammo for it. Lovely. Come on. Yeah! That was way too close. Oh, wait a minute. What the... Where did my ammo go for my LRM-15? Can I still fire it? Oh boy. I can still fire it. I must have encountered some kind of bug or something. Am I yes, I'm recording. Oh wow. This is so going in the opening.
Temperature 34.65 degrees. Local time is 01:34:16 GST. All systems nominal.
Today's Ancient DOS game is one of the most epic games ever released in the days of DOS gaming, MechWarrior 2. It's going to be virtually impossible for me to do this game justice because there's just so much content to this game, and it's, quite frankly, a massive step beyond the original MechWarrior game. This game was in fact so well done that it completely eclipsed the original game, similar to what happened with Street Fighter when Street Fighter 2 came along. Now, since there's a lot to talk about this time around, let's get those game stats out of the way. MechWarrior 2 was both developed and published by Activision in 1995 and was originally a one-player 3D action simulation game, though later on an addition called NetMech was added to allow for networked multiplayer matches. The original release supported three 256 color graphics modes, VGA 320x200, SVGA 640x480, and SVGA 1024x768, making this one of the very few games ever released for DOS to support a resolution higher than 640x480. Curiously though, it doesn't support 800x600, which was a standard resolution at the time, though what makes this even more confusing is that later hardware-accelerated releases of this game would support 800x600, exclusively. So, I don't know, the game's just weird like that. It has support for multiple sound cards, too many to even attempt to list, so really, just pick whichever one you feel sounds the best. Though don't be surprised if you have to swap the left and right audio channels. As for its current release date, it's still commercial, but finding a copy is really easy. Granted, they're generally not that cheap, with the PC version usually going for about $12 to $20 for just the game and the jewel case, and around $30 if you want the box and everything. Speaking of getting this game with the box and everything, take a look at this manual. This is one of the coolest manuals I've ever read. It has little fingerprint smudges printed on the inside and lots of scribbled notes suggesting that many other people before you had read it and that it was being handed down to you as a guide to get you started on your path to becoming a full-fledged mech warrior. The game even came with 2 flyers, one for each side you can play as, to promote their cause and persuade you to join them. I know I still have them somewhere, but I couldn't find them for the sake of this review. Suffice to say, it gave the game a personality all of its own. Now, as you can imagine, there is a story to this game, but it's incredibly complex, and unless you're a die-hard fan of the Battletech universe, there's virtually no way I can condense it down in a descriptive way. So I'm just going to give you the basic gist of what's going on. In the Battletech universe, there's several factions that lie around the outer edges of the galaxy known as the clans. They've adopted a very different way of life from the rest of humanity, each primarily using genetic manipulation and gene pooling to advance themselves beyond the limitations of ordinary men. However, in the year 3057, Clan Jade Falcon made a severe accusation of genocide against one of the leaders of Clan Wolf, resulting in what would normally be called a trial of refusal, but this combat rapidly escalated to all-out war between the two clans, and is commonly referred to in Battletech canon as the Refusal War. As for the game itself, you play the role of a young mech warrior whose very first decision is to decide whether to fly with the Falcons or dance with the Wolves. Your ultimate goal is to rise the ranks through completing missions, win the Refusal War, and go for that lofty dream of attaining the rank of Khan, the highest rank possible for any clan member. So since the game is split in this manner, where you basically choose which half of the game you want to play when you begin, you'd think it'd be short. But no, this game is massive. Regardless of whether you join Clan Jade Falcon or Clan Wolf, you will take on 6 training missions, 16 actual missions, and 4 trials of position to increase your rank. The training missions are actually almost identical between the two sides, so in essence, you get a total of 46 missions you can play in this game. There's simply no way I can showcase this entire game, and while most of the missions are just go here, blow this up, there are a lot of variations on this theme, and things that can go wrong in the process. For example, when playing as Clan Wolf, one of the missions you get is to inspect a power converter to see if it's active or not, and if it is, to destroy it. Now, it always will be active, so one way or another you have to destroy it, but if you fail to inspect it first, then you can't prove it was being used illegitimately, and thus you fail the mission. Another great example with Clan Wolf is one mission where you have to secure a lunar base and protect it. When you first get to this base, the enemies are intent on destroying you. However, once you've eliminated them and more enemies are sent in, you stop being the primary target and they start going after the base instead. There's even one mission that's supposed to be just a simple patrol, but then turns into a rescue op, and then turns into a trap where you get assaulted by a slew of mechs. It's pretty crazy stuff. Before you actually get started with any missions though, you have to configure your team, which includes selecting your mech. Not only do you have a choice of 15 different mechs in this game, but they are all fully customizable to an extreme level. In fact, the customization aspect can almost be as fun as the game itself, since you have to balance both the weight of the mech with the armaments you're giving it and the amount of space available. An example of this is whether or not you equip your mech with standard armor or ferrofibrous armor, the latter providing more protection per weight, but taking up additional space, which you could be using for weapons, ammunition, heat sinks, or jump jets. There's no shortage of weapons to choose from either, though there are some curiosities about them. You see, MechWarrior 2 is pulling all of its stats from the actual Battletech game system, and since that's a turn-based system, it doesn't quite translate perfectly to a real-time format. For instance, the UAC-20 and XAC-20 weapons can only fire 5 rounds per ton of ammo, which is virtually nothing, but the amount of damage done per round is insane and simply doesn't make logical sense. Why would you construct a gun with ammunition rounds so massive that each one literally weighs 1/5 of a ton? I can understand reluctance to change something like this when you're basing these numbers off of tried and true formulas from the related tabletop game, and ultimately these numbers were changed when MechWarrior 4 came around. But it makes those weapons very specialized and very annoying to use, since missing a single shot is not just incredibly disappointing, but a relatively massive waste of ammo. One neat thing you can do when designing mechs though is what's commonly referred to as boating, when you primarily load a mech with multiple copies of a particular kind of weapon, such as loading a mech up with nothing but medium lasers or nothing but long-range missile launchers. Considering you're going to face many environments and technical challenges in this game, it's important to design your mechs to face those challenges. While it's nice to have a catch-all that can work in a variety of situations, you're going to rapidly find yourself designing your mechs to face the specific missions ahead of you. For example, when you end up somewhere with a ridiculously cold temperature, you're probably going to leave a bunch of heat sinks out of your mech to make room for more weapons, since heat dissipation won't be as much of an issue. Or if you end up on a planet with high gravity, you may invest in fewer armaments to make room for a stronger engine so you can outpace your opponents. The game itself is very much a simulation. There are a plethora of keyboard keys to control your mech in a variety of ways, including altering your radar range, setting your throttle, engaging image enhancement or light amplification, commanding your teammates, zooming into the distance so you can aim better, setting up weapon groupings, inspecting targets to see what's inside. There's even a self-destruct button combination, just in case you figure the situation's completely hopeless. Your mech even comes equipped with a fully voiced computer system which apprises you of any situations that occur, such as the detection of new mech power signatures, the completion or failure of mission objectives, but there's one particular voice warning you're going to hear a lot in this game.
Heat level critical. Enemy.
Yeah, essentially every mech has to deal with heat levels. If your heat levels get too high, a shutdown sequence is initiated in order to allow your heat levels to dissipate more rapidly so that you can get back to firing your weapons more efficiently. The problem with shutting down, though, is that if you're in the middle of combat and you shut down, that's several seconds you have to last for without any ability to move or shoot. So to keep you from becoming a sitting duck, there's a handy little key on your keyboard to override the automatic shutdown sequence. You need to be very careful with this function though. If your heat levels stay too far in the red for too long, you run the risk of your ammunition turning into popcorn, resulting in internal ammo explosions which can take out entire limbs or even your entire mech. If you don't have any ammunition, then you only have to worry about running full red heat levels, which is the maximum tolerance level beyond which your reactor can melt down and, well, basically explode. Beyond heat levels, the weapon grouping thing is probably the most important aspect of the gameplay. When your mech first boots up, all weapons will be set to weapon group 1. Each time you fire a weapon and release the fire button, the weapon selection chains to the next weapon in sequence in a particular group. But since certain weapons are only really useful under certain conditions, it's best to group your weapons accordingly. That way, when the situation requires particular weapons, you can just change to the appropriate weapon group and only fire weapons from that group. Usually it's best to group weapons by type, such as placing all long-range missile launchers in one group, all long-range laser or ammunition weapons in another, and all medium or short-range weapons in the third. But really, your groupings are going to be based on the various roles you've selected your weapons for. Alas, there's only 3 weapon groups, so it's usually best to design your mechs while keeping this in mind. You also have the ability to toggle an all fire mode, which fires all weapons in the currently selected group simultaneously, but you need to keep a careful eye on your heat levels when you do this, and it's usually not a good idea to do this with missile weapons due to limitations of the game engine as to how many projectiles you can fire at once. Just like with the original MechWarrior game, and even the tabletop game, one of the key aspects that's going to keep you alive is your mech's ability to torso twist, which allows the entire body to face one direction while walking in another, giving you a full 180 degrees of easy aiming without having to turn your mech. At least for the most part. You see, the mechs themselves actually have the ability to actuate their arms and hands, and since the game includes a couple mechs that can't torso twist, and since you can apply arm and hand actuators in the mech lab, I think the programmers were originally going to intend to allow you to aim your arm-mounted weapons more easily than torso-mounted weapons, but that capability didn't actually come into play until MechWarrior 3. This kind of resulted in a tactic where everyone who played this game would simply mount all their weapons in the torso, since arms are more easily shot off and weren't giving any extra aiming capabilities. Though, I still like to play fair and mount my weapons like any sane MechWarrior should. I'm kind of running out of stuff to talk about without going into in-depth lists of all the content this game has to offer, so let's talk strategy, since there is a lot of strategy that can go on here. Firstly, when making your choice at the beginning whether to play as Clan Jade Falcon or Clan Wolf, consider this. Clan Jade Falcon tends to send their mech warriors on solo missions using powerful mechs, whereas Clan Wolf prefers to send multiple lighter mechs into their missions. Personally, I like playing Clan Wolf's missions solo just for the added difficulty. These differences show up in the trials of position as well, which are used to increase your rank. In Clan Wolf's trials, you're put in a fairly powerful mech and expected to survive against multiple adversaries. With Clan Jade Falcon, your trials are always one-on-one, with your mech being severely underpowered compared to your opponent. In terms of outfitting your mechs, jump jets are an absolute necessity in this game, because they give you an extreme amount of control that you normally don't have, allowing you to do really quick turns, instant reverse movement, and even lateral movement, all of which will help you to stay alive. You also need to balance your heat sinks versus the amount of energy and missile weapons you have. The more energy weapons you have, and to a lesser extent missile weapons, the more heat sinks you'll need to make effective use of them. Now, in the Battletech universe, there's 2 different kinds of heat sinks, singles and doubles. And there's virtually no reason at all to use single heat sinks in this game, especially since this also affects the 10 built into every single mech, so definitely stick with the doubles. Now, sometimes you may need just a few more critical slots or a little more weight to make your loadout work, but usually it'll come down to a choice between endosteel internals or ferrofibers armor. Anytime you have to make this particular choice, going with endo steel internals generally works out better. Also keep in mind that the larger your engine is, the larger your gyro has to be to account for it, but the more heat sinks can be built into it without taking up extra space, not to mention the more jump jets you can drive at once. 99% of the time, you'll also want to stick with an XL engine, since it's half the weight of a standard engine and only needs an additional 4 critical slots. As for the gameplay itself, even on hard difficulty, the AI is, well, rather stupid, and it never fires its weapons as intensely as it could. Unfortunately, this also translates over to any teammate to take along with you, which is generally why I prefer to do missions solo when I can. There are 2 ways to take advantage of this. Firstly, if you're faster than your opponent, get behind them and stay there. They will be completely unable to hit you. However, without mastering the jump jets, this can be a little tricky. Secondly, if your opponent is using some powerful weapons against you, chances are they're mounted in the arms, so make taking out the arms of your opponent a priority if they're doing lots of damage. Thirdly, you want to choose where you aim based on what you're up against. For example, the Gen 2 C mechs have an extremely exposed head, so shooting out the head on these mechs is relatively easy. For any mech lacking jump jets, go for the legs, because if you knock out one leg, you'll completely immobilize the mech, and shooting out the other one will destroy the mech completely. Lastly, try to keep your distance. The AI in this game is kind of partly based on the way the numbers are handled in the Battletech game system, so the further you are from an enemy, the less accurate their shots will be. At the same time though, some of the best weapons in the game are short-ranged, so really, you gotta learn what range you're comfortable fighting at, and then load your mechs out with weapons to match. So yeah, that's MechWarrior 2, a game that really makes you feel like you're piloting a 60-ton walking death machine. It's an all-around fantastic game, even if you're not a big mecha fan. Heck, this is one of the most approachable games ever made to feature giant fighting robots, since you don't have that many variables to worry about, yet you get the full simulation experience, complete with a heads-up display, several interface features, and a really simple system for choosing and shooting weapons. If you like action games, or if you like shooting games, or if you like highly customizable games, or if you just like blowing stuff up, then I can assure you, you will like this game. The great part of it too is that if we pull up the DOSBox settings, yeah, very simple. All you gotta do is set cycles to max, and that's really all there is to it. Heck, if your system's powerful enough, you can even run this thing at 1024 by 768 resolution through DOSBox and get a decent frame rate. The game also has joystick support, but it's kinda hard to play that way, so I recommend a keyboard plus mouse. Interestingly enough, I find MechWarrior 4 actually plays better with a fully featured joystick than with a mouse, which is curious, but whatever. One last thing too, since the game comes on CD and all the music in the game is CD audio tracks, what you're going to want to do is use a CD image program to create a QBin image pair of the CD, and then use DOSBox's image mount command to mount that in DOSBox. Otherwise, the CD audio music might not play properly. Anyways, that's all for episode 55 of Ancient DOS Games. Next week's the filler episode, and if you've been keeping track of what's going on with my website, you might have a good idea of what I'm going to be taking a look at. So stay tuned for next Saturday to find out.
Enemies trial phase 2 successful. Second rank acquired.
Mission successful.